What have we got here? Right next to a busy road. A dead proven turbine. And the top of the tower is missing. So this has hit the ground with some force. There's the blade mounting plate, which is welded to the main shaft, and it's bent as anything. And the springs are bent also. And looky there, the spring mounting brackets are different. They've got a return on the end. So it'll be interesting to get into those and see how the design's changed. I was hoping the blades were going to be some good, but they're all toast. They've all got notches in them and all sorts of things. But it will be interesting disassembling this and looking at the generator. There's the slip rings down there, and something seems to be bent in amongst that as well. It's obviously because it's blade, because the rotor is downwind, it's the piece that's hit the concrete first. So I'm going to take this apart and investigate the various designs and keep what parts that I can, but I suspect there won't be many. So here we are. Look what we got here. A smashed proven turbine. I unbolted the blades earlier on. I went to collect this today. As you can see, the blade mounting plate bent and smashed. So we'll get this off the trailer. Thanks to Mark for giving me a hand to put this on the trailer. It's mighty heavy. We've already covered this on the winching discussion. No way you can lift that. Two people can't lift that. We have to do we had to use this little trolley, and then we got it on the back of the trailer with levers and a bit of brute force, but very difficult. Anyway, thank you Mark for giving me a hand with this. I'm just going to back the trailer up now and get the tractor on the job. So here we go, just briefly, the wind's behind me, and on this machine the force on the wind shaft is from right to left. So there should be, at some point, like for instance on that bearing, there'll be something to lock that bearing onto the shaft to stop it sliding. But at this end we have the generator, and there's a donut set of coils between two spinning magnet plates. So we don't want the shaft to move in those bearings at all, or else the magnet plate on the upwind side, as in on the black cover side, will come in contact with the generator coils. So we need to find out what locks the wind shaft in its position like that. What takes the thrust of the turbine blades. We also need to investigate the brake a bit more, and then once we got to that point, I'd like to investigate how to take the generator apart. I know under that cover there is a big nut which needs undoing, and it's Loctited in place. I'm assuming that holds the first of the generator plates in place, and I'm also assuming there's the set of shims under it that set the magnet plate to generator coil gap, which should be about 1 mil. Now the interesting thing is, I want to know this because on the 48 volt one that's currently running, the magnet plate gap is something like 3 mil, which just goes to show that the build quality of Proven turbines in this era, which was about 2003, 4 or 5, I'd have to look it up, is obviously going downhill rapidly. Another sort of comment here is this has obviously been maintained reasonably well, because look at all that grease there. That's pushed out the seal, so that bearing's been greased reasonably well, although the wind shaft bearings don't quite seem to show the same level of care. But anyway, I'm going to get out this wind, going to go up into the workshop, and we'll look at some of the other parts that I've taken off when I was moving this thing. I've removed as much as I can just to reduce the weight. So following on from the turbine repair, there we go, running smoothly enough. Excellent. That'll do for the moment. Now let's go and have a look at this wrecked one again. I want to really get involved in the minutiae of how it's put together. Right, where do we start? These are the slip rings. They're mucky, but they've been laid out in the wet for 2 or 3 years. That fits on the top of the tower, and there's a grub screw there, and there's another one there between number 1 and number 2, and each one of these is connected to one of these bolts. And one of the problems with these is, over time, is if you want to undo those, soak them first, because that's brass, and if you give it too much welly, it'll shear off, and you can't replace it, as you see. So say for instance that's to that, that's to that, and the top one is to this one. You can't do anything after they're sheared off, or so I'm told, and I'm not really feeling like I want to investigate that. This is a removable plug. Okay, so that's that. These are the slip rings, like that, with a bolt for each of the connections. 3 connections, 3 phase, and obviously that is connected like that. Easy enough. These are fairly robust. These springs were as rusty as anything, which you'd expect because it's laid in the weeds, in the grass and nettles and brambles. But I've just put a bit of oily diesel on there just to soak everything so the rot doesn't get any worse. And it's held on the chassis by just this piece here and that nut. So that's that. Let me just turn this wind shaft round. Cool. Even this is more than 15 kilos. Let's just see if we're still in view. Let's move round a bit. So that's where the main pivot bearing sits on the main chassis, and then this sits on the top there, held in place with grub screws, and as I've said already, that goes like that. That's simple enough. So if you want to get this off, find your way round, dig into there because it'll be covered and filled in with all sorts of things, and get the grub screws, 2 of them, and then it should just slide off. It is not a tight fit, as is the bearing is not a tight fit there. The grub screws hold it in place, and the weight of the turbine head is pressing down that way, so it doesn't have to be a brilliant engineering fit. I want to have a look at the other end of this, and any of you metallurgy people, I'd appreciate some views on what you see, although as we've said, it's been sat out in the weeds for a couple of years. Let's just put a, there we go. Let's do a real close-up of that. So this is sort of tapered, as if it's been rocking on that bit, and there's a spiky bit there, and it's burred over a bit there, and this is, look, this to my mind is the fresh bit. That is smooth-ish, smooth round here, and that is rough. So it's probably been started cracking somewhere here. Now I do know that the guy who had this before dropped it on the floor by using an incorrect winch. So whether or not that caused the damage to start with, and I'm guessing this is about 8mm thick wall steel tubing. Yeah, that's taken some beating to make that crack up like that. Unless of course there was a crack there and they welded it. But I can't really see any signs of the weld apart from this burred over bit here. So come on you metallurgists, give me some feedback on that. Anyway, that's that. What else have we got to show you? So let's have a look at the springs. They're toast. That one's stretched. These are bent. That's what the spring anchor looks like. It's tapered and a coarse thread. Obviously just winds into the spring. There you go. And the bracket itself, not only is the bolt bigger either end, this one looks like a 10mm, whereas previously it was an 8mm on mine, but this bracket's different. So we're just going to undo that and have a look at that. Interestingly enough, the other end, where are we? There we go, has got a lot of wear on it. Look at that. So that was a disaster waiting to happen as well. It's obviously just been quite noisy, and look how it's worked its way into that nylon bush. Something weird's been happening there. I think we'll undo both ends. Well, this is interesting. First of all, can you see the wear on that bolt? So that's been sort of squeaking and rattling, and nobody's been taking any notice of it. Second thing is that wear there. Again, nobody's been taking any notice. But this bracket looks like it's drop forged, because it's got a socket built into the base there, and that's quite thick, but this piece, this side, is even thicker. So they've really gone to town on that, and it must have been a changeover period when I got ours, because I know this turbine had the new set of blades fitted about 6 months after I had the new blades, and they've obviously come up with this new bracket in the interim, which is about typical. I just need to show you. Here you go. Let's try and get that there. Can you see that? And this piece here, which I thought was just a return, is actually solid in there, and it's slightly curved, and then creates that two parts of that hexagon. So that is a real heavy duty piece, but it didn't stop a lack of maintenance causing a potential problem. Lack of maintenance, or not the right bits fitted. And if you see here, look at that hole. It started to wear through fairly close to there. So brilliant design, but could have done with a bit more metal there. Yeah, no point skimping on that bit if it's going to wear through on some turbine that's up in the Highlands and nobody's looked at for donkey's years. You don't want that breaking. You don't want a weak point built into the system. Anyway, let's have a look at one of the blades that came off this turbine. So there we go. That's been mashed and delaminated. So I don't think that's repairable. I mean, it might be. It's tough stuff, this. I'm assuming it looks like carbon fibre, but I'm not sure. And just up here, over there, just there, it's split. It's broken right across here down to here. You can feel it there. So, you know, I can see it moving on that joint. So it's toast. The other one has got a big mash in it, and the third one, which was underneath, is bent. It's got some dings in the front, but it's bent also, where it's dug into the ground. Let's just have a look at the other end, the anchor point. So there it is. And what I wanted to see was what that rubber does. So I'm going to undo all those bolts and see what that rubber does. I'm assuming now that it's not bonded in there, but bolted in there. But there's only one way to find out. I mean, this rubber flexes, and it's a bit like boiler rubber, that sort of heavy duty fibre rubber stuff. I want to see if it's replaceable. Not that you could probably get this anymore. I've undone those bolts. That's one of the plates. So have a plate, then a plastic piece, and as we know by taking apart the springs on the other turbine, the ubiquitous little plastic bushers, they're everywhere. Okay, so you've got that both sides, the steel plate and this plastic piece. Undid all those bolts, and then, not quite sure what that is, some sort of goo by the looks of it, and a bit of a good old belt with the mallet, and that does actually come out that socket. It's a bit bent, but it's got ropes through it, and you can see where it's been rubbing and wearing. Hopefully we'll see that. Let me just zoom in on that. So you can see where the ropes are embedded in that rubber. Be interesting to know whether that was that bent shape from new or whether it was flat. I'm more suspecting to the fact that it was probably made in that shape. I'll just give you a cross section of that. There you can see. That looks like it's made there, like that to me. And there's the socket. And it looks like that was some form of silicone, just to try and keep the water out of that socket. Anyway, it's blowing a gale outside, so I don't really fancy trying to film then. All you'll get is a load of wind noise and rushing in the microphone. But hopefully you're enjoying this investigation. I really want to know how that generator's put together and shimmed, which is one of the primary reasons why I spent a fair bit of effort chasing this turbine down. But it's interesting to know, and you know, taking something apart which you know is toast does mean that when you want to take the real thing apart, it saves a lot of grief. So let's just say that we're practicing for something in the future. And of course, I have to put it up on YouTube, because if I have to take this apart in about 10 years time, who's going to remember apart from YouTube? We'll catch up with you next time when we start investigating the chassis and the generator. Cheers for now.